The morning Vince Harrow unzipped that black duffel bag, the world around him seemed to stop breathing. Frost clung to the landfill mounds like a thin layer of ash, the Rocky Mountains looming above him as he dug through trash to survive another day. At 52, with a broken past and a son who no longer spoke his name, Vince expected nothing from the world except more loss. But then he uncovered a tarp hiding crates, plywood scraps, and beneath them, a military-grade bag sealed tight. Curiosity pricked him like a spark in the cold. He dragged it into the open, knelt, and worked the zipper free. Inside were rows of $100 bills, stacks upon stacks, crisp and unreal beneath the dim light. And beneath those bundles, a silver briefcase taped with handwritten instructions about cryptocurrency wallets and access keys. Millions, possibly far more, hidden in the filth he sifted through for cans and copper wire. Standing there, surrounded by garbage and freezing air, the weight of the discovery pressed into his chest like a second heartbeat. It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It felt like a dare from the universe, a test offered to a man who had nothing left to bargain with. Vince didn't smile, didn't celebrate. He just stared into the duffel, realizing every decision from this moment forward could either resurrect his life or bury it deeper than the landfill beneath his feet. Vince carried the duffel into his trailer like a man smuggling dynamite into his own home. The bag looked impossibly out of place against the sagging walls, the flickering bulb, and the table that wobbled every time he breathed near it. He emptied the contents with trembling fingers, counting the cash until dizziness washed over him. $2.3 million, enough to erase years of humiliation, enough to reclaim the dignity he'd lost piece by piece. But the briefcase was the part that wouldn't let him exhale. It held a USB drive, cold storage keys to Bitcoin purchased more than a decade earlier. He spent hours at the library squinting at articles, learning that one coin could now be worth tens of thousands. If these keys were real, the fortune in that briefcase dwarfed the cash completely. More than wealth, this was transformation, possibility, danger. He buried the duffel in the cold ground behind his trailer, covering it with dirt and dragging a rusted storage bin over the fresh soil. When he stepped back inside, his breath fogged the air in front of him as if even his lungs didn't trust what he'd done. He stared at his empty table, at the bare walls, at the quiet that had felt familiar for too long. The money hadn't changed anything yet, but it had awakened something in him he thought had died years ago, a pulse of hope. And a whisper of fear that hope like this always came with a cost. Days passed with Vince pretending nothing had changed, even though everything inside him had shifted. He still woke before dawn, still picked through frozen trash with numb fingers, still smiled at Floyd in the gate booth like every morning. But when the sun went down, Vince turned into someone else entirely. He filled notebooks with research, business licenses, junk hauling permits, recycling laws, equipment costs. He learned how to hide cash quietly, exchanging hundreds for 20s across multiple counties. He bought a used hauling truck at an estate sale, its engine loud but dependable. Then he filed papers for his new company, Second Chance Reclamation. The name felt like a confession and a promise stitched together. Dwight, an old co-worker hanging on by a thread, joined him to help launch the operation. Their first weeks were brutal, long hours, small accounts, cold nights repairing equipment by flashlight, but they were building something real, something earnestly theirs. The landfill scavenger became a business owner. The man living meal to meal became someone with a plan, yet every good day left him uneasy. Because behind all the progress lay a truth he couldn't erase. The foundation was stolen. The business was rising on ground that could crumble if anyone dug too deep. Still, Vince pushed forward, hoping each honest hour built atop that mistake could someday outweigh the wrong that started it. Pinehaven began to change because of Vince. Houses that struggled with waste removal suddenly had reliable service. Schools received anonymous donations. Pauline's Diner stayed afloat thanks to quiet, well-timed support. And as Second Chance gained momentum, people saw something in Vince they hadn't seen in years: purpose. But not everyone welcomed the transformation. Councilman Lel Griggs, proud gatekeeper of Pinehaven's politics, watched the rise with cold suspicion. At a county meeting, he cut into Vince's presentation like a knife. "Where did the startup money come from?" Lel demanded, voice echoing. "How does a man go from rummaging through garbage to landing county contracts?" Vince gave his prepared answer about a small inheritance, but the room felt heavier. Afterward, that night sitting alone with his ledger, he realized the lie had started breathing down his neck. The briefcase, still locked with its mysterious code, became unbearable to ignore. With the help of a discreet consultant named Terrence Albright, the lock finally clicked open. Inside were wallet keys granting access to nearly 500 Bitcoin, a fortune beyond anything he'd imagined. Terrence warned him to convert tiny amounts, move slowly, hide in plain sight. But Vince didn't feel triumphant. He felt hunted by the truth he couldn't reveal and responsible for a gift he'd never earned. Then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife further, his phone rang. "Dad," Aaron's voice, older, cautious, wounded, broke through the quiet. And for the first time in 10 years, hope and dread collided in Vince's chest. When Aaron arrived, Vince watched his son step out of the truck with the guarded distance of someone who had learned not to expect much. Vince showed him everything: the facility, the routes, the crews who respected him. For a moment, pride flickered in Aaron's eyes, softening the years of resentment. But then the parking lot filled with the slow, heavy roll of black SUVs. Federal agents stepped out, badges catching the warehouse lights. Behind them stood Lel Griggs, triumphant. The agents presented a case file: an armored truck robbery from 2012. Millions stolen, 2 suspects dead, money never recovered. An anonymous tip had pointed them straight to Vince. "Can you explain your capital?" the lead agent asked. The question crushed the air from the room. Dwight froze beside him. Workers murmured. And Aaron, his son, stared at him with a dawning horror Vince would remember forever. Lies would only prolong the fall, so Vince told the truth, all of it. How he found the money buried in the landfill, how he kept it, how he used it to build everything around them. Silence rippled before reality hit. The agents seized records, accounts froze, and the fragile bridge between Vince and his son cracked completely. "You built this on crime," Aaron whispered, eyes hollowing. "Every promise, every piece of progress was a lie." He walked away before Vince could breathe another word. And when the agents left, the warehouse felt colder than the landfill had ever been. The morning after the raid, Vince did something he'd avoided his entire life. He faced everyone head-on. His employees gathered in the break room, fear tightening every face. Vince stood before them, voice raw but steady, and confessed the whole truth. He expected empty chairs by the end. Instead, Floyd spoke first. "Is the work we've done honest?" "Yes," Vince answered. "Then the mistake at the beginning doesn't erase the good we built," Floyd said. Others nodded. 10 stayed, 2 left. And with that fragile circle behind him, Vince began the hardest fight of his life. Attorney Francine Yates negotiated with the federal prosecutors, presenting evidence that the business had become self-sustaining. Vince agreed to surrender the stolen money's equivalent using cryptocurrency profits, allow quarterly audits, perform community service, and publicly admit the truth. Then came an unexpected ally, Walter Paulson, father of one of the men who died in the robbery. He had been hired by Lel to investigate Vince, but instead had watched quietly for months. "My son threw his life away for that money," Walter said softly. "You used it to help people. That matters." He testified at the public hearing, a packed room holding its breath while employees, teachers, and neighbors defended Vince's impact. And in the back of the room, Aaron listened, not forgiving, not forgetting, but listening. When the commission ruled in favor of keeping the business open under strict oversight, Vince felt the first fragile spark of hope return. In the months that followed, Vince rebuilt his life with the honesty he'd spent years running from. The audits confirmed Second Chance no longer relied on anything tainted. Every paycheck, every contract, every expansion came from genuine work. Vince lived humbly, pouring the bulk of his cryptocurrency wealth into anonymous community grants, roof repairs, medical bills, emergency funds for families barely holding on. Meanwhile, Aaron remained cautious but present. They met weekly, sharing meals filled with awkward pauses and quieter breakthroughs. Slowly, honesty replaced avoidance. Slowly, trust began to regrow. Eventually, Aaron moved back to Montana, taking an operations manager role in the company he once believed he needed to distance himself from. In spring, he asked Bryn to marry him, and months later, he asked Vince to stand beside him as best man. At the reception, surrounded by laughter and music, Aaron raised his glass. "My dad didn't erase his mistakes," he said. "He owned them, and in doing that, he showed me what real change looks like." The room went silent, then erupted in applause. For Vince, those words meant more than forgiveness. They mean a future. Years passed, and every morning Vince walked through the warehouse with a quiet gratitude that never faded. Workers greeted him with warmth. Trucks rolled out. The town thrived. And Second Chance Reclamation, once born from desperation, had become a cornerstone of the community. The millions he still held were no longer a weight but a responsibility. He used them to fund scholarships, restore community spaces, and lift families who lived the life he once barely survived. His home stayed modest. The baseball glove he'd restored for Aaron sat on a shelf beside new family photos. One evening, after locking up the facility, Vince stepped onto his porch to watch the Montana sky fade into a tapestry of stars. The same stars had once watched him dig through trash for survival. Now they watched him stand in the quiet of a life rebuilt honestly, one choice at a time. Redemption hadn't erased the past. It had reshaped it, turning a moment of moral failure into a lifetime of responsibility and growth. He breathed in the cool night air and whispered, "Some treasures find us when we're finally ready to carry them." If this story touched you, tap the like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. And before you go, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now?